Nardi, Somaliland is a critical U.S. maritime security partner in Africa. Somaliland stands with our allies, including Taiwan and Israel, and aligns with U.S. interests in a region where China is aggressively expanding. Offered the United States a military basing agreement and a critical minerals partnership. They are willing to work with us to counter China's malign influence and terrorist networks. Earlier this year, I sent a letter to President Trump urging formal recognition of Somaliland. Unsurprisingly, the Chinese Communist Party immediately condemned that letter, which only underscores how strategically important Somaliland is to U.S. national security. Thank you. I'm going to do a couple more questions, and then we'll give Senator Booker an opportunity if he has any additional questions as well. Ms. Nardi, Somaliland is a critical U.S. maritime security partner in Africa. It sits along the Gulf of Aden near one of the world's busiest shipping corridors, and its forces actively contribute to counterterrorism and anti-piracy missions. Somaliland stands with our allies, including Taiwan and Israel, and aligns with U.S. interests in a region where China is aggressively expanding. Somaliland has offered the United States a military basing agreement and a critical minerals partnership. They are willing to work with us to counter China's malign influence and terrorist networks. This is the kind of partner we should be encouraging, and one that will shape how we confront maritime security challenges across the continent. Earlier this year, I sent a letter to President Trump urging formal recognition of Somaliland. Unsurprisingly, the Chinese Communist Party immediately condemned that letter, which only underscores how strategically important Somaliland is to U.S. national security. What tools and partnerships could the Bureau of International Narcotics and Law Enforcement employ to help the United States deepen cooperation with Somaliland to advance our common maritime security and law enforcement interest, especially against threats facing the Horn of Africa?
Thank you, Senator, for that question. INL does not currently have any active programming in Somaliland, and our focus in the Horn of Africa is, in general, maritime security. I mentioned the Center of Excellence that we are working with Djibouti to establish, which will cover that region and then a little bit further south. We have worked with Somalia in the past and Djibouti on maritime vessel boarding and investigations, but those programs are coming to an end. We certainly can review capabilities. We would begin any program with an assessment of needs, and we would work in close cooperation with the Africa Bureau and the State Department to determine their priorities for Somaliland. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Sylvester, Senator Booker asked about undersea cables. Undersea cables are the arteries of the modern global economy. Africa is linked to the world through 77 cable networks that power its digital markets, support millions of jobs, and drive trade and innovation. But these cables are exposed to vulnerability. Just last year, cable cuts left parts of Nigeria offline at a cost of nearly $600 million in just 4 days. Repairs run into the millions, and outages ripple far beyond borders. Even worse, there are less than 100 cable repair ships across the world, of which only 3 of those service Africa, and only 1 is home-ported in Africa. Our adversaries understand that if you can control or disrupt digital infrastructure, you can hold economies hostage. That's why maritime security is not just about protecting freedom of navigation and open commerce, but also about protecting the cables beneath the seafloor that nations depend on. Strong, secure, and open digital links means stronger trade ties, resilient supply chains, and a continent less vulnerable to Beijing's chokehold. Mr. Sylvester, what roles should U.S. maritime cooperation play in helping African nations diversify cable routes, protect high-risk, shallow water zones, and improve rapid response capabilities, especially considering that only 1 cable repair ship is home-ported on the entire African coast?
Thank you, Senator, for that question, and again for highlighting this important issue. So I would go back to the importance of building a resilient undersea cable system globally, which includes, of course, around the continent of Africa. So when we see these cable cuts, for example, there was an incident in the Red Sea following a Houthi attack where 25% of the transcontinental data traffic was stalled, so in addition to the examples that you mentioned. So the resilience really is key there. The second is we do have a leading company here in the United States, and we, as the State Department, are focused on promoting those U.S. companies as viable and trusted vendors across Africa. So while there are a limited number of these ships, the U.S. does have a good alternative to offer in the commercial space. And the third is, again, educating the host countries that either have landings or want to put the investment in to have those cable landings. So on that front, we need to ensure that they know the data security risks and the malign influence that they would be exposed to if they were to go with an untrusted vendor.
Thank you. Senator Van Hollen.
And I'm going to ask the senator to indulge me. I have to run. Sure. If you could take over checking the great senator from Texas to make sure he doesn't talk about me or Stanford football when I leave.
I will do that, Senator.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, okay. I am going to have to head to the floor.
Do they have a football team?
Let the record show that I have asked the Senate leadership to Rule 19 you for that personal insult.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank all of you for your testimony. I do want to pick up on a point I heard the ranking member make earlier, and I think some of my colleagues, with respect to President Trump's despicable statements about the Somali community here in the United States. And it is just the latest attack on a minority community in our country. You know, if you look at the United States Senate above the dais, it says e pluribus unum. Out of many, one. And what Donald Trump is doing is just the opposite. And it's despicable here at home. And he has also maligned the countries of origin of so many of our communities here in the United States. So I have to say, as we talk about Africa, it is difficult to do so without noting our extreme disappointment in the President of the United States. I want to talk about a particular country in Africa the President continues to malign, and that's South Africa. Mr. Sylvester, South Africa is one of the African continent's biggest economies, right? I think it's in the top 3, is that right? And it does play an important role in maritime security in the southern Africa region, is that right? I mean, it of course, sits astride the Cape Sea route, and my understanding it also plays an important role in policing and anti-piracy efforts in the Mozambique Channel. Is that right?
I would defer to my colleague on the law enforcement side, but my understanding is that it's an important maritime nation in general.
Right. So, an important country in Africa, both from an economic point of view, from a political point of view, from a maritime security point of view. And yet, the Trump administration has decided to target South Africa. We know that despite the fact it's a G20 member, the president says they can't come to the G20 meeting in the United States. We know the United States decided not to go to South Africa for the G20 meeting that was hosted by South Africa. We've heard the president make up this completely false accusation that South Africa is engaged in a genocide. And of course, when it comes to our immigration policies, our refugee policies, I think the administration's put a worldwide cap of about 7,500 on it overall, and the great majority would be white South Afrikaners. So I ask you, Mr. Sylvester, what is South Africa doing to warrant these kind of unfounded attacks?
So, Senator, my understanding of the scope of the hearing is on maritime security. I'm not sure I'm equipped to address the question as you've asked it. What I would say with respect to South Africa is that President Trump has shown willingness to work with any country to advance American interests. and our embassies on the ground are still pursuing commercial opportunities for U.S. companies across the continent.